Hello and welcome to the podcast series. In today's edition, we talk about children's rights, from the Constitution cascading into the Children's Act. With us today, we have ENS Africa's Natasha Wagiet, who is their CSI portfolio manager and responsible for the pro bono work that one of the largest law firms on the African continent does. Natasha, welcome to the podcast series, and we look forward to hearing all of your insights.
Thank you so much. Lovely to be here.
Great. Natasha, let's kick off with the Constitution. It is seen as one of the most progressive pieces of legislation, and a lot of people or countries look up to it. When we look at the Constitution in terms of children's rights, let's unpack that a bit.
Well, you're right to say that we really are trailblazers within the realm of rights. Our Bill of Rights is renowned throughout the world, but in particular, when we look at the ambit of children's rights, we can hone in on Section 28, where it says that the rights of the child are of paramount importance. And that word paramount is so very important because there's a direct acknowledgement that children are particularly vulnerable and need to be protected.
Right.
And therefore, we need to give them the utmost care. And that's why organizations such as ChildSafe, the name itself, reiterates and taglines with paramount importance for children's rights and their safety.
Fantastic.
Yes.
So if we look at how that Bill of Rights enshrines the right to access healthcare, the right to be safe, the right not to be neglected, the right to go to school, and so forth. Help us understand a little bit of those nuances.
So, like I said, the baseline is paramount importance and vulnerableness of children. So all of those little rights within the big right is foregrounded by saying, you need to be able to have access to health care. You need to be kept safe. You need to access basic education. So if that doesn't happen, there's certain consequences that will fall from that. And so, for example, if your guardian, who's supposed to take care of you and your things that you have, et cetera, doesn't do that, you have a right to speak up as a child and say, I have that right. It's in Section 28. It's even furthermore unpacked in the Children's Act.
Right.
And I'm going to now go and access it. And this might cause a bit of a hullabaloo because parents might be like, no, you don't. We're your parents. But it comes from the fact that if that is not being accessed and the right in Section 28 isn't being realized, something needs to happen.
Right.
So that's very important that we understand that. And therefore, I always say, I think I spoke about it earlier to you, even that it's better to have an open relationship with your children, speak to them, and so that you do it collectively. Because if you're not going to step into the role that you're supposed to be as their guardian, then they have a right to get it somewhere else and they have a right to access it.
And what does that right to access look like for a child?
So say, for example, they fall pregnant, and we know that teenage pregnancy, I won't even say teenage pregnancy, it's child pregnancy. We've seen this happens. They can go after a particular age and say, you know what, I want a termination of pregnancy. They don't have to get consent from their parents. It will then just have to be actioned. The only thing that needs to happen is that the person responsible, so for in this instance, the healthcare worker that they access must understand that they must make sure, that they understand and know what the benefits are, what the risks are. If that's cool and they are of sound mind and they're compass mentis, like we like to say these big Latin words, but they're able to think and understand, then it can go ahead. Yeah. Say, for example, they want to be tested for HIV and they are above 12 years, for example. They have a right to do that, provided that they understand.
Without parental consent.
Without parental consent. And that is why it becomes a bit iffy in terms of parents being, no, this is my child.
Right.
And therefore it starts at home with openness.
Right.
Yeah.
And when we look at that accessing to healthcare, I think many people may struggle with the concept of how can a 12-year-old, it's my child.
Yes.
How can that child consent without me knowing about it? And I think it's important for us to contextualize it for viewers because there's instances of gender-based violence and sexual assault. and the child may not necessarily feel comfortable to discuss a rape case with a parent. Or the perpetrator may be one of the parents.
Or a close family member.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's for that reason that the Act permits children to enact their own right and their own safety to an extent. Because in most cases, the perpetrator is closer to home.
It's, the perpetrator. Sometimes we think it's the boogeyman or boogie woman outside, but a lot of the times, unfortunately, it's within that family space.
Right.
And therefore, on that, it's very important also that if you're an educator or you a person, for example, you're the pastor or the imam or any adult, but more so those type of individuals who the children have an interface with, if you suspect something is wrong, you have a duty to do something about it. To go, for example, if you're an educator, go to the headmistress, headmaster, principal, whatever, and say, something's a bit iffy here. Can we get a social worker? Can we contact the education department? Because if it's found out later that you could have been aware of it and you did nothing, because the child's so vulnerable, you could be held liable.
Right.
Yeah. So it's to try and stop sweeping things under the carpet, so to speak.
So, Natasha, in cases of sexual assault, very few people actually know that you can't just go to a police station. Help us understand why.
So generally we're all taught go to the police station, and in a utopian world, I know I might get a lot of flack from this, everybody will be clued up, everybody will know what to do. But we live in reality, and yes, there are millions of or thousands of SAPS officials that do know, but there might be those that don't. Therefore, there's the specialized unit. It has family in it. Don't ask me the full name, but when you go to the police station, you can ask to speak to that unit or a member from that unit if you decide to access SAPS. And they will then take your statement and guide you further. And the reason for that is because it's specialized. However, you can also access for example, a Tutuzela care center, and they are particularly clued up to know what happens from the beginning to the end of the process. You can also go to your district hospital because they will know what to happen, because I know the first thing you want to do is you want to clean yourself, you want to take your clothes off, you want to just get rid of all those physical manifestations of this trauma that has been done to you or perpetrated on you. And that's the worst thing you can do, because you're throwing away evidence. So it's important to, if you want to go to SAPS, but speak to that specialized unit, they know what to do. They will also then know to refer you probably to that center that will do that, and the district surgeon will do X and Y. You'll get whatever pills you normally get, because there's a whole regimen, because we're trying to protect you from X, Y, and Z that can flow from the rape. They'll be able to take you through the statement almost immediately afterwards, so that everything is kind of like that the defense attorney can't go, oh, really? Do you remember that? It's happened so far afterwards. Just to guard against that, they'll be able to protect the evidence in the right bags, take the stuff under your nails, and so forth. So think about it. If you've ever watched CSI or Law and Order, Special Victims Unit, what they're going to be doing there and taking that evidence is what you want to ensure, because that's the big chance that you have for it to proceed. Because the first hurdle is there enough evidence to proceed? And then once it's decided that this matter is going to go forward, it needs to be proved beyond a reasonable doubt by the state that you were in fact raped. And that is a very high burden. So you want to do everything in your power to ensure that that happens.
And procedure obviously plays a significant role when it comes to judiciary and law. So when we look at that process, a simple thing like not using the right evidence bag, or not going to the correct doctor, like you had to go to a district doctor, could impede your legal outcomes and the chances of a successful conviction.
Yes, and you don't want it to be thrown out on a technicality before you even get to the substance.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's quite important for the viewers to listen to that procedural steps that needs to be taken. It may not be comfortable, but it's necessary because we get far too less or too little convictions when it comes to sexual assault or gender-based violence, and particularly where children are involved. So that is from a healthcare perspective. Moving into slightly a social perspective, let's start talking about when violence starts affecting children, and there's a break in the house, or, a break up in the house, shall I say. Children's rights in terms of separation.
I go back to the baseline. The best interests of the child are of paramount importance. So what does that mean in the context of access? It used to be called custody and all these words. But access and care, as the terms are used in the Children's Act. It is to cause the least disruption in the child's life so that they have a sense of normalcy and they can thrive. So what that happens is mom and dad are fighting, right? The cops may have been called, cops may not have been called. If cops are called and they see that the child is at risk, they have a duty to let the Department of Social Development know, and a social worker needs to step in. And that child might very well be removed and put in a place of safety, or let a relative, if someone like that, look after the child. So that's very important to know. Don't fight in front of your children. Do your utmost. It's just really bad. If not, okay, parents are now decided, I can't stand your face. We need to separate. This is before divorce. What needs to happen is you need to come up with a plan, even if you get a third-party mediator involved, and do what's called a parenting plan. But you can access the family advocate for that as well, which is a free institution, part of the Department of Justice, and they can assist you. They have trained social workers, psychologists, legal people, all of that. What that does is it regulates the child's life in as much as possible so that things can flow. But you need not be selfish about it. You might not like each other, but you still love your kid, right? So that might be that Mila, my daughter, for example, is staying at home, and then mom might leave for a week and dad might look after her, and mom might look after, if that's a possibility, so that we don't disrupt Mila's routine.
Right. Or
it might mean that mom moves out or dad moves out, but mom doesn't move too far, so that Mila still has a way of seeing mom every day. How you tailor it is very nuanced, but what you need to be guided by is that the child's life must not be disrupted. Or it must be disrupted because there is going to be disruption, but in minimal, as least as harsh a way as possible. Right. That's very important.
Right. Yeah. So, so many of children experience a difficulty in enforcing their rights, simply because it's not something that's necessarily taught at school, or it's a lack of knowledge. So if we had to tell children how to enforce their rights, what would we say to them?
I'll use it in the context of bullying, for example. We've seen that very much. Children don't know their rights. But I always tell them, speak up and speak too. So speak up, firstly, get it within yourselves, and you have all the bravery in your heart. So speak up, speak to somebody you trust. If it's not mom or dad or whoever, it's a teacher, it's somebody at school, and then put that burden onto the adult. So you're taking it off your shoulders, put it onto the adult so that the adult can take it further. So most importantly, don't keep quiet. If something doesn't feel right, even though you might not know the words for it, you know what's right for you and what's wrong for you in your heart. Speak up, put it onto the adult, and make sure, follow up with that the adult does something about it.
I think that's some really good advice.
Yeah.
So we hope that teachers and caregivers and anybody responsible for minding children pay attention when children speak.
Yes.
Take notice, because like Natasha said, if it's later on found that you did not act or do something, even though you knew about it, you may be liable.
Yes. So every single instance I hear, for example, I have to do something about it, because otherwise I wouldn't be fit and proper.
Right.
But as a community, I think if we're just guided by the principle of Ubuntu and doing unto others, we'll know that it takes a village, and children are all our responsibilities. That's very important.
That's such a nice way to frame it.
Yeah.
And is there anything else that you want to add from a child rights perspective?
I think you've said it very succinctly when you say you need to listen to children.
Yeah.
You need to acknowledge that children are not an extension of yourself. They are autonomous beings.
Oh, that's such a powerful statement. Wow.
Yes. So they have their own wants, needs, and dreams. And once you understand that, what did Khalil Gibran say? Children come through you, not from you. They are autonomous beings. And once you realize that, and you realize your place in guiding them through this life, I think it will only flow better. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Natasha.
Pleasure. Lovely.
So Natasha is a postgraduate in law, and as I said, she is the CSI manager at ENS Africa, one of the largest law firms on the African continent. If you enjoyed the content in this video today and would like to see more of it, please like, subscribe, share, and follow, and make sure that everybody in your network can also access the insights that you've gained here today. Thank you for joining, and we look forward to seeing you next time.